Yes, so welcome back to iConnect 2016. You all certainly look refreshed and all set to start up with this segment. So let me introduce to you the next speaker. Well, it's none other than Amit Mehta. He's the country manager for EMC's Isilon storage division and is responsible for accelerating its growth within India and SAR. An astute professional with background of BE and MBA from FMS, Amit has over 20 years cross-functional rich experience in sales, product marketing, field marketing, and strategy planning and principal alliance management. Being an enterprising leader, he has the ability to train and motivate cross-culture teams in optimizing their performance levels. Amit holds a superior record for conceiving strategies and steering them to successful execution. In his previous role at EMC, he was a key member of the APJ Field Marketing Organization, empowered with the responsibility of orchestrating field marketing programs in India and SAR, while aligning global marketing campaigns and frameworks with the in-country business priorities and being a key driver for business growth. Let's put our hands together for Mr. Amit Mehta.
Quick video to give you an insight of what we really have to offer. Over the next 30 minutes, I'll give you insights from the storage world, a piece that accounts for about 20 to 30% of infrastructure. So a quick video and then we'll
people safe. More cameras with higher resolution and real-time video help us.
So, as I said, we are the people who contribute to 20 to 30% of your video surveillance budget. So important to understand and see how we can help you navigate the growth in the data that is being driven by the video vortex. I'm joined here by my team as well. So just request the EMC team at the back of the room to stand up. We have Nipun, we have Sheikh Shahid, we have Priyabrata, and we have Manu Shankar. Manu, are you around? Manu Shankar heads our APJ practice. So opportunity for us to share with you best practices as we see in some of our top customers, opportunity for us to learn and also help debunk some myths. So I'll get right away. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the following. One, the emerging trends in video surveillance as we see it from a storage standpoint. And I'll pop some questions and happy to get some responses as to how you're thinking about these. EMC's vision on the video surveillance and the smart city platform, and that's really our vision to help you take you to the next level and plan what your video surveillance landscape is going to look like. Because I realize a lot of times, working with customers, it's a very point approach to buy something here and now, but 5 years down the line, what our vision is not very clear for many customers. EMC and Milestone, the work that we do together, and our industry leadership. So before I get into that, just a couple of questions. Coming to myths. How many of you have looked at scale-out architectures compared to scale-up architectures when you're looking at deploying storage for video surveillance? Scale-out architectures. Scale-up architecture, just to give you some context. What is a scale-up architecture? A scale-up architecture is you've got controllers, you have got dual controller environments, you've got spindles, and every time you add capacity, performance is the best the first day. As you add capacity, performance starts to go down. Then you add multiple controllers, and what you land up having in your data center is a plethora of multiple controllers and multiple boxes. Familiar with that? How many of you have had problems configuring LUNs and RAID groups and transferring data, right? When it becomes unmanageable, when the data grows, because to be honest, as much as you want to plan, data growth beats your expectations. LUNs, RAID groups, so that's the typical problem in the scale-up world. So just the fact that not many raise actually your hands on scale-out architectures gives me an opportunity to insert this conversation. The second conversation that I wanted to have really is how many of you have looked at analytics ready or Hadoop analytics in your video environments, or is on the roadmap to doing that? Yeah, couple of hands. So what you realize is when we have conversations around Hadoop analytics, because Hadoop is the best open source platform to do analytics on unstructured data, we realize that again people haven't thought through. In a scale-up architecture world, what you start to have is you insert gateways to expose the SDFS interface, right? So again, you're adding complexity within your environment. So analytics is another area where we're looking at this thing. The third really is about how many of you have looked at the amount of protocols? So how open is your video data lake as it were? And you would realize that your thinking is limited by the current set of interfaces that are coming up and not necessarily takes into consideration some of the new advancements in technologies around object. And we're going to talk some of that. So those are three areas that we've been having conversation, and we realize India is a tough market. There are set ways to do things. We're going to try and break some paradigms. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So just from a storage paradigm, and we heard this during the morning on the cameras. So what is driving the data deluge? What is the video vortex? One is unstructured data as it is doubling every 2 years. Within that unstructured data, video is the one which is really driving growth. So what is driving growth essentially? One, you have multiple type of ingestion platforms. So, we're talking about drones, we're talking about body cameras, we're talking about license trackers, we're talking about audio and video reconnaissance, right? So many of these plethora of you have multiple varieties of ingestion sources that are going up. Second, clearly, if you really look at your pixel world, imagine the amount of innovation that's happening on the digital side. On cameras, you would realize that the pace is really accelerating. So you're talking about HD, you're talking about 4K, you're talking about multi-pixel, and just your platform's ability to scale with that is phenomenal. So I don't know how many of you have looked at the rate at which this is growing and the level of fidelity that you're willing to live within the environment. So that's one big churner of data. The second one is, the third one really is just the multiple, the quantity of cameras that you're putting in your environment is going up. So clearly, one other thing that we realize is that when you get into the planning phase, how many cameras you're going to put to achieve what fidelity, to achieve what angle. I think those are areas which you start dabbling with and really working through as you get midway through the project, right? Is that a real experience? So, and the final one really is this whole notion of an expanding, we already see that, the smart city, the safe city environment, the residential regulations, and the whole thing about, just identification of number plates and all of that. So, that's what we see is driving. Now, the problem is, you would have realized that the storage growth and the budget allocation for storage growth will not commensurate the growth on this side. So, how do you look at opportunities for reducing your capex and opex? And what we believe is some of the innovations on the camera side is going to help you do that. Some of the innovations on the BMS side is going to help you. But the fact is there is that layer of storage which is going to be critical for you to start optimizing. So really, what this is, there are three, what this data deluge is leading to is organizations have to really think about these three things. These are the three dominant conversations we are having. So first one is around scale. How are you scaling? Are you going to be scaling in terabytes? Are you going to be scaling in petabytes? What is the roadmap of that? What is the data growth on an annual basis? Second is, what are the different sources of data sets? So this is the first myth, and we've been breaking our heads on this. Why look at scale-up architectures when you're going to look at petabyte growth? Because in the scale-up architecture world, you're going to be adding complexity, you're going to be adding multiple controllers, you're going to be adding data center footprint, you're going to be adding power cooling costs, and the pain of migrating data. I can take, just to add a couple of terabytes, today I'll take 24 hours to 48 hours. In the scale-out world, I can add 400 terabytes in 60 seconds. As easy as that, and the world of learn and rate doesn't exist in that world. So I realize a lot of people, because they have skill sets on certain platforms, that becomes an innovator to growth, and the organization is designed around that, and that also becomes a blind spot. So how are you looking at scale? That becomes critical. The second one is shifting to the enterprise model. When we look at enterprise models, so we talked about network security, but what about things like forensic? What about things like compliance? What about things like worm compliance around data that gets into that video data lake? And increasingly, those data sets are becoming ready. What we see is, when we are having conversations, whether it is government, whether it is private, the opportunity, the discussion tends to be on terabytes and total acquisition cost on terabytes, as opposed to an framework of how secure is this environment. So we have network security, but how secure is the data set residing within that video data lake? And the final one, I think Milestone talked about it, Access talked about it, this whole notion of open platform. So as you are getting multiple versions, so those of you who are going to be innovating on analytics, HDFS, today HDFS is on 2.3, tomorrow you'll have HDFS 3.0, different versions, you will have Object, you will have Swift, you'll have to integrate properly to an Amazon cloud. So getting locked in proprietary environments, and the whole last 5 years have been a debate of two architectures. One is an engineered application where there's a black box, where you have storage, where you have compute, everything coming together, and this whole other notion of best of breed, you have compute, storage, and network scaling different requirements. So those are the different myths that we address, and as we talk to them, we realize that just working through each of these and peeling the layers becomes important. So that's what it is driving. Now what this has led us to do, because of our experience on open platforms and because of our experience on we have dealt with large data sets since 2006, more than even before that. Every time an avatar gets made, every time Galaxy of the Stars get made, all those Hollywood animation films, we have dealt with those data sets where the files can be megabytes and gigabytes. Our experience in the GIS or the geospatial space, again, multiple megabytes and gigabyte file sizes, we have had expertise in. So what we've essentially done is we've launched what we call the industry's first data lake. And data lake is a term that IDC uses for one single source of truth of all your unstructured and structured data. So that resides in that data lake. And what that does is, so we've launched the industry's first data lake for video surveillance solution. And what that essentially means is that regardless of the sources of data, so Anand talked about Internet of Things, and regardless of the ingestion sources, so you'll have biometrics, you'll have audio, you'll have video, you'll have sensors, drones, regardless of the data sources, regardless of the protocol from which these sources come, will have one single storage infrastructure. The architecture of that information, infrastructure can be either distributed, centralized, or in the cloud. So there are multiple consumption choices for that. And then what you build on top of that is an abstraction and automation and provisioning layer built on virtualization. And by virtue of VMware being a company, and by virtue of the work that we're doing in the open source world with multiple hypervisors, we are able to offer customer choice. And then finally, we have a validated set of applications ranging from VMS vendors and analytic vendors and applications. So client applications are going to access this. So what this essentially does is it gives you one data lake which becomes entirely scalable. So what this essentially does is, so when you look at architectures per se, there are three kind of conversations we have, and really, the best practice world is the world where you do have a centralized NOC, where you do have, so for instance, on one side we have the distributed architecture. So look at these as remote sites where there's no point getting data sets. So a remote police station aggregating data, caching data, monitoring data, ingesting data locally. You don't necessarily want to get it onto another site unless you're setting up a centralized NOC. That's a classic use case of, so you have 50 terabytes, 30 terabytes, 20 terabytes of data sets. Now, when you're looking at those kind of data sets, scalable or a scale-up architecture makes sense. It gives you, lower dollar. The total acquisition cost at those data sets is cheaper in the scalable world. But then you are wearing the lens of, are these going to be going into petabytes or going to remain in the sub 100 terabytes? So scale-up architectures make sense there. Lower dollar per gigabyte, you still get bandwidth. For instance, in our VNX, VSS, video surveillance system optimized for video surveillance, we can get you about 500 MB per second, those kind of data sets. Second is you could do audio, auto balancing. Rather than having to do manual volume-based balancing, you can actually have algorithms which take care of this policy management, and then you can manage it from the simple interface. But the key is the data set and the fact that you do have the need for processing it locally as opposed to sending it somewhere. So that's what we call the edge locations. Now when we look at centralized locations, now the centralized locations are what we call core. Now what you will now reckon is the centralized locations become, they need to be highly resilient. They need to actually scale up in terms of, from terabytes to petabytes. They need to be worm compliant. They need to have forensics and audit trails open to them. This is where what we offer is the EMC Isilon storage system, which has been the storage gold standard in the media world for many years, and now emerging as gold standard in high petabyte installation. So we have got You can scale from terabytes to 50 petabytes, in the coming release 100 petabytes. One file system to manage the entire volume. So there's no need, so you have one massive volume, one single namespace which you can manage, as opposed to tapering of volumes and balancing volumes. Again, the opportunity for, because the system is one volume, you don't need to keep discretionary space for quotas, snapshots. In that world, you can actually have higher efficiency. So one of the conversations we have with customers is, what are you evaluating? Are you evaluating usable capacity? Are you evaluating raw capacity? And do the due diligence of what that ratio is. In case of Isilon, for instance, which is at the core, a gold standard best practice architecture at the centralized sites, we can go to north of 85%. We have our media customers taking it to 90% in terms of utilization rate. So one of the things that people we get into conversation with, what is the real usable capacity and what is the performance throughput at that capacity? And you will realize, again, to the point that was made earlier in the Access presentation, look at beyond the data sheet. One of the things you might want to do is throw a performance test, get the system to do a pilot, because each and every time you've gone and done a pilot, the throughput numbers don't match up. So for instance, with Milestone, we talked about earlier, we can get to north of 3 gigabyte per second kind of throughputs when you're doing those multi-streaming applications. Why we are used to multi-streaming? Because we come from that world. When you're editing an animation file that has been accessed by 20, 30 people sitting on Apple machines, that's how the system has been designed. So that's Isilon for you. Single file space, petabytes of growth, secure, and very efficient. And the good part is open to all protocols are natively supported. So one of the other things that we realize is, do you need to be caught in which protocol? So tomorrow, your landscape may start to evolve for a variety of reasons. So whether it is CIF, whether it is SND, whether it is HTTP, FTTP, objects, SDFS, all of them are supported natively from the same data lake. And what that essentially means is it is analytics ready. So today, you can aggregate at the central site. You can do offline analytics on Hadoop leveraging this. The system, in the system, it is indexed. You can do queries, unstructured queries on the data. You don't need to have a separate HDFS gateway or a separate DAS infrastructure. And here is where our works with Cloudera, our works with Hortonworks, Apache Hadoop, our alliances on the open data platform come in handy. And finally, on the cloud side, what we realize is many customers do think about cloud. And the cloud is thought about in the space of, can we take our cold data sets which we're not going to use to the cloud? How many of you are considering cloud for your cold data sets? Okay, so for a variety of reasons, many people don't consider that because there are bandwidth issues that come into play. But there are ways to do that, and we support that natively within the infrastructure. So for instance, within the centralized core of Isilon, I have a piece of software which can automatically, basis policy, send your cold archive workloads to the cloud, which could be an Azure, which could be an Amazon S3, or which could be your own private cloud, such that only your active data or your warm data sits on the centralized infrastructure. And there are solutions that we have for that. We have got Elastic Cloud Storage, which is an object storage. Again, this is hyperscale multi-site distribution, and that's where the dollar per gigabyte even comes from. So right from distributed smaller set applications to object applications, the entire gamut is facilitated. The key is, have you thought and have you given it much thought to the architecture? That's where we consult, that's where we work with you. Really, the 4 R's of storage, as we call it, we've got retention policy, your recording policy, your resolution rate. All of that governs and how long is it going to be continuous based or going to be trigger based. All of that actually defines what your storage should look like and what your architectures look like. My only request is do that due diligence upfront. The TCA versus TCO conversation, just so that you know, a TCO on a scale out architecture is 46% lower than the TCA, on a scale up architecture. Why? Because when you start adding multiple controllers, you're adding multiple FTEs, you're adding data center flow space, you're compromising on performance. Taken into that, IDC has done a paper which says 46% lower OpEx and all of these. So I think that's important. This is how we're looking at an environment. And this is where Anand stole our slide. Where are you, Anand? Yeah, there you are. So what this is what we call a video data lake. Where is the collection point? We are saying this is your video data lake. And the point that we're making here is, you can write into the data lake by any of these protocols. This is why we call it open. At any point in your evolution, you are not constrained by which protocol is being used by which VMS vendor. All you need to do is do a turn on, in the storage system. So when you're looking at safe city projects, for instance, here is where you have video files, you have number recognition, and that's where you start integrating. So in the same data set, analytics can start feeding off. In the same data set, you can feed analytics. And you can have cloud apps also and everything. So the opportunities for you is to think about that video data lake and the value of that to your end customer. What would that mean at Infosys? What would that mean? Incident management becomes easy. Today, to be honest, the state of some of the government installations is very poor. Not because of any technology issues, but real operational efficiency and operational best practices, right? So that's the vision of the data lake. How this vision of the data lake gets into the smart city application, or how we're thinking about smart and safe cities, is what we're saying is, each of the departments in government, when they come together in service of the citizens, there are multiple departments which are using data. Government launched the eVault application where you can have all the data sets. You have Aadhaar, which has your biometrics and a bunch of stuff already there. Opportunity for different departments to work off from a centralized data lake in a government cloud and delivering citizen services. You already have Aadhaar. Aadhaar, incidentally, is on a EMC storage box. So all of that, when it gets integrated with revenue information, when it gets integrated with unstructured data from social and that becomes the basis for rendering services. And the interface for that is also provided by us along with our ecosystem with Pivotal Labs, which is an alliance company, Platform as a service company, and that's the direction that we take. Now, what this means in your environments, what this means in government environments. So those of you who are consultants, those of you who are vendors, look at the long-term picture. If that's the direction you want to take, are you going to be waiting for tenders again 5 years down the line? Or the decisions that you take can scale up to that level? The problem right now in this industry is this dollar per gigabyte. This tendency to buy commodity is going to short, in the long run, is actually short-changing. So that's the message that we are taking to customers, and we need the collective part. So the way we're looking about this, so this is that smart city platform. At the base is the infrastructure, and there's a combination of infrastructure designed to support your needs. In the middle is an application layer, or based on Apache Hadoop, which actually builds on unstructured data query, Hawk, Impala, across a multiple vendor set, whether it is Cloudera, Hortonworks, or it is Mapper. All of that is that layer. You build that layer, and the final one is the application layer and the visualization layer. Now again, those of you who are customers, my urge is to think, so if the direction is this, and if there is an opportunity for large organizations to embrace this, then your decision starts now. If the direction is point distributed architectures, then you can still go ahead with what you're deploying, but take that call with awareness as opposed to being blind on that decision. And then so for those of you who are system integrators and those are consultants, opportunity for you to work with us and take the entire gamut of professional services along with it. So what gives us confidence is this ability that we have at our EMC validation labs. You saw it in the video. We have about 6,000 engineers working from our Bangalore, India COE. We have the Durham Center, and again working where we're actually testing to fail. That's the philosophy. Are we testing to fail? Are we putting the kind of workloads that we are actually bombarding our systems along with our ecosystem is what is governing the rigid validity and the benchmarks that we're throwing. So what this has given us our ability to test about 21 to 25 application vendors from different streams to be able to integrate with us in a very meaningful way. Coming to EMC and Milestone, for instance, we've created what we call our commitment to the X-Protect open data platform is really about working with open standards. We've created a best reference architecture, and if you see the best reference architecture is that, listen, you need block for your database into which the camera, the VMS is going to write, but that database is not huge. So you can use a scale-up architecture for that and just use, but where your massive data sets are going to reside, where the TCO is going to scale, where the performance issues are coming, where migration of data sets into archives are coming, configuring lane, LUNs, RAID groups, all of that can be put on a scale-out platform. So the best practice architecture, again, there are people who understand this for the long term, take a leap of faith. There are people who are still guided by the total cost of acquisition, they don't. But for those of you who are looking at best practice architecture, this is the architecture, the way to go. For your block, look at a small application, look at a small a sandbox, which could be potentially $10,000. But when you're going to spend gigabytes and use the tier 2, the tier 2 needs to be on a scale out. Because otherwise what you're going to do is, you'll have tier 2 data sitting on a tier 1 array, and the math is never going to add up. You might do camera optimization, you might do VMS optimization on data sets, but the truth is data sets grow. And those data sets can't be sitting on a tier 1 SAN array, they need to be sitting on a tier 1. That's the myth. SAN versus NAS is a big discussion. People are just locked up on that. Okay, you need to write into a SAN application, but that cannot be the life cycle of the entire data set, because that's where the data growth is. Okay, clearly our opportunity here, what gives us confidence is the 500 petabytes we've installed globally. Our market share in this business is about 27 points. Again, ISS report. Our market share in the APJ region, 200 petabytes deployed, about 37%. We come from that experience and heritage and lineage. Our experiences in the media vertical of experiencing big data sets are what gives us confidence to actually come to you and say, listen, not a problem. You want 3 gigabytes, not a problem. What we're coming out with an all-flash array in a short while, which will take it to 100 petabytes and multiple gigabytes of throughput in your arrays. Some of our Indian customers we've got Ahmedabad Police, we've got Gujarat, Pune Police, we've got Gujarat, we've got UP, we've got Mumbai City Surveillance. Again, you will see the difference in architectures. And that's where I do want us to, as a collective community, think what architecture will actually stick in the overall scheme of things. And then there are a bunch of Indian customers who actually embraced our VSS solution and our scale-out architecture solutions. So clearly, in short, really, what are we saying? We're saying our opportunity is we have the industry's first data lake, which helps you scale, which helps you manage the data deluge, which gives you a best reference architecture to grow, which helps you manage multiple architectures ranging from edge to core to cloud. That gives you flexibility. You don't want to be caught up. The second is really this whole market share. We have the credentials behind us to actually match to what we are saying. The third is clearly the ecosystem that we built. So ecosystem is a big thing. You would have heard all 3 vendors talk about it, because to be honest, life changes, life evolves. You might run into one ecosystem at one side and relationships evolve. So you don't want to get locked with situations where ecosystems are not elastic. And then finally, our industry's validation lab, when it comes to surveillance testing, clearly we nail it better than most of our competitors. So in summary, the video vertex is driving the data deluge. Have you planned enough? The myths of when we're looking at platform, particularly storage, which is going to constitute 20%, 30% in certain projects, have you looked at, are they scalable? Is there scale out or scale up in that environment? Are you going to scale out? Are you going to put tier 2 storage on tier 1 arrays and going to have plethora of boxes on your data center footprint? Answer is no. Look at how enterprise ready they are in terms of compliance, in terms of forensics, and finally look at just this whole opportunity about how open they are. We've got a comprehensive portfolio. We talked about it. A vision for a smart data lakes. For those of you who do have a vision of forensics, analytics, talk to us, because at least we are not cheap. We will not be cheap, but again, as my colleague from Access said, we come at a price point which makes it the premium worthwhile. And then finally, our ability to leverage and stress test what we're putting in the environment, I think gives us a strength. So thank you so much. Just I stand before you as a new entity now. We decided to merge EMC and Dell. Michael Dell and Silver Lake Partners decided to merge EMC and Dell last October. We are coming to a point where we start integrating as companies from August 30th onwards. So opportunity for us to also look at holistic systems, right from compute to storage to applications now coming from one roof, from Dell EMC. So that's a great promise. And as we get into 2017, the 2 companies will offer some joint engineered solutions. So for those of you who have a Dell relationship, count on us. That relationship is only going to get better and stronger. So thank you so much. Open to any questions that we hear. Manu is going to be on the panel. He brings expertise on some of the more advanced markets like Australia, like SEA, and will give you insights on what really are they thinking and how they're thinking about scale up. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Amit.